Chapter 39, April 11th, 2016, Hart Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C. Connie spent the morning contemplating her life's work. She had spent her entire adult life in public service, and the last week had created a whirlwind of emotions. Instead of the happy retirement send-off that she had imagined for herself for so many years, she had left in disgrace. She had been fired. Her security clearance was revoked, and the senator had been furious. After Martin's article showing the memo written by the president's chief of staff, there'd been little doubt about who had leaked it. When confronted by the senator, she had openly acknowledged her role and had told the senator that she was tired of watching the political machinery in Washington make a mockery of the rule of law. She no longer wanted to be a part of something that justified deceit and fraud, all in the name of furthering a cause. The senator had simply said, "Connie, gather your belongings and leave these premises immediately. You're done here." Now, over a week later, she had been summoned to report to the office of the Sergeant-at-Arms of the United States Senate, the law enforcement authority of the Senate. She'd briefly contemplated ignoring that order, but upon reflection knew that it would be pointless. She had already decided to accept whatever consequences came of her role in the leak that was now shaking the foundation of the political circles in which she had formerly participated. On her arrival, she was escorted to a small office and told to take a seat. Unlike the prestigious surroundings of Senator Beale's office, it was a tiny room with a small metal table and 6 old, rickety wooden chairs. It smelled like an old library, musty with a hint of dust in the air. Technically, the Sergeant-at-Arms had the authority to arrest anyone who violated Senate rules, but today he had simply responded to the request by the FBI to assist their investigation by summoning her to his office. After 10 minutes alone in the room, the Sergeant-at-Arms walked in, glared at Connie with steely eyes, and began berating her as if she was some common criminal. "Ms. Simpson, you know why you're here. In a few minutes, I'll be turning you over to agents with the FBI, but first I have a few things I want to say. In the many years I've had the honor to serve the Senate, I've never had to deal with such an outright betrayal as yours. You have violated the integrity of this august body, one with a powerful history reaching back over 200 years. It's people like you who smear the reputations of some of the finest public servants to have ever walked the earth. I can't imagine why you've done this, but I hope you'll spend an eternity in hell for the shame you've brought to this institution." Connie remained silent while enduring this man's verbal assault. His face was red and puffy, only amplifying his moral outrage. He simply stared at her, awaiting a response, perhaps expecting her to fall to her knees and beg for forgiveness in a fit of tears and remorse. He was about to get something entirely different. She leaned forward in her chair, crossed her hands on the table, and in her most dignified manner responded in a soft, calculated voice. "Dear sir, while I appreciate your frankness, I find your righteous indignation amusing. As long as you've been here, I have no doubt you've witnessed some exemplary statesmanship. But unless you're the fool of fools, I'm sure you've also been privy to some of humanity's most despicable treachery. I've worked in the Senate for much longer than you. This august nature of which you speak is only an illusion, and you should well know that. You are either a fool who's blinded by your idealism, or you are party to the shenanigans, or, dare I say it, the evil that haunts these halls on a daily basis. When you speak of the reputation of which I have supposedly tarnished, is it the one that has managed to garner a 14% approval rating from the people it purports to serve? Is that the one? Have you considered just how sheltered you must be to consider that reputation something of which you should be proud? Do you not tire of the constant mental gymnastics it takes to convince yourself of your high-minded superiority? I know I did. I got tired of trying to convince myself that the vast majority of the country was stupid, illiterate, or simply incapable of understanding what was good for them. I became exhausted from convincing myself that lying and backstabbing was the only way to accomplish our lofty goals. I'll admit I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. After all, it took me nearly 30 years to realize the error of my ways. But I'll tell you this. Even knowing I will likely spend time in prison for what I've done, I've slept better in the last week than I have in my entire adult life. So you go on deceiving yourself and others, pretending to be holier than thou. But in the meantime, save your breath. You'll do no good trying to shame me. It simply won't work. My head will be held high from here on out, thank you. Now please leave me alone until the FBI arrives. I might be able to catch a short nap while I wait for them." The sergeant-at-arms was aghast. His puffery deflated. He huffed and mumbled something unintelligible, turned and walked out of the room as Connie smiled and leaned back in her chair, feeling better than she had felt in years. Good Lord, I wish I'd learned much earlier in life how refreshing it is to be released from the chains of deceit. After another 10 minutes, the door opened once again. This time 2 men in cheap, wrinkled black suits walked in, both expecting to find a frightened little old lady, as though she had worked in the church for 30 years and had been caught swindling money from the church coffers. Accustomed to sizing up their victims, they were rather surprised to find a smiling, confident lady who looked as if she had nothing to lose. Connie answered their questions with absolute truth. As the questions went on, she became more emboldened with confidence. She actually found it exhilarating. This is the easiest interview I've ever done. This whole tell the truth thing is so underrated. The agents were nearly taken aback with her honesty, almost disappointed that they didn't have to employ their usual sneaky interviewing techniques to get the answers they'd sought. They had fully expected to arrest her on obstruction of justice charges, but that was clearly out. Now they were simply left with a charge of leaking a government document. Technically, it was not classified, although she had clearly broken the Senate rules. In the end, they actually had no charges that would hold up under judicial scrutiny. Having finished their questions, they both looked at one another and shrugged. They thanked her for her honesty, told her she was free to go, and walked out of the room. Connie sat there for a moment, not sure what to do. Moments later, she stood, brushed off her skirt, and left the room, walking with her head held high, feeling justifiably morally superior to the sergeant-at-arms who watched her leave. She took time to savor the look of dismay on his face. Good God, I never realized how good it feels to best someone when you're right rather than through deceit and trickery. As Connie returned to her car, she turned on the radio, tuned to her favorite news channel, and heard an announcement of breaking news that should have happened years earlier. Senator Shelley Beale, the titan of the Senate for decades, known for her sharp tongue and backroom deals, and the one solely responsible for ushering through most of the president's legislative agenda, had announced her immediate retirement. Connie smiled and shook her head, knowing the mainstream news would be heaping praise on and touting the long and successful career of her former boss. While she would never wish Alzheimer's disease on anyone, she couldn't help but wonder if karma wasn't yielding its just power.